My friends, on 30th of April, Ukraine and United States signed the mineral deal. It's the mineral deal that caused so much drama, so much fighting between Zelensky and Trump, even the all chaos in the White House that happened. It was because of that very same mineral deal, but a previous draft of it. Ever since then, so much has changed, and finally there are signatures now here cementing long-term United States interests on Ukrainian soil. This video will open up everything. How much resources Ukraine has, what is the United States' interests, and will it deter Russia? When a country sits on something valuable, the same familiar faces don't just come knocking. They step right in, make themselves comfortable, and leave behind a contract with a pen already uncapped. Right now, Ukraine's minerals are a main event, and Washington isn't just eyeing the menu, it's already calling the waiter. The only question is, does Ukraine get a seat at the table, or just the bill? Ukraine is home to some of the largest reserves of key industrial minerals in Europe, including vast deposits of titanium, lithium, and graphite. Its gas fields, coal mines, and uranium supplies are also significant. While not all of the resources are fully mapped or exploited, the sheer potential has placed Ukraine at the center of a global resource struggle. But there's a problem. A large portion of these resources sit in Russian-occupied territories. Crimea's offshore gas fields, Donbas coal and metal reserves, and Zaporizhia's titanium deposits. Russia isn't just controlling these lands, it's extracting and integrating these resources into its own economy. For Ukraine, controlling its remaining resources is critical, not just to fuel its economy, but also to strengthen its position on the global stage. While some key deposits remain under Russian control, the battle isn't only about reclaiming lost wealth, but also about protecting and maximizing what's still in Ukrainian hands. With the right investments and international backing, Ukraine could become a major supplier of critical minerals, giving it strategic leverage. The big question is, can Ukraine turn its natural riches into an advantage that keeps Western support flowing? In this video, we'll break down the scale of Ukraine's resource wealth, who controls what, and whether the riches can be turned into a strategic asset. Let's dive in. And before we go, my friends, I gotta let you know this is a members only video, and if you are a member, you got an early access of 1 week before everybody else. So sign up as a channel member, links in the description below, and each Saturday you will get a video just like this one. Natural resources have always played a quiet but powerful role in global politics. For Ukraine, they're more than just an economic asset. They are a source of both opportunity and vulnerability. As Western nations look for alternatives to Russian and Chinese supply chains, Ukraine's underground wealth has become a point of growing interest. But to understand why, we need to look at what's actually beneath the surface. At the heart of Ukraine's mineral wealth are rare metals and critical minerals, essential for modern technology, defense, and energy. One of the most sought after is titanium. A lightweight but incredibly strong metal used in airspace, military vehicles, and industrial applications. The global defense industry depends on stable supplies of titanium, and Ukraine holds some of the largest untapped reserves outside of China and Russia. That alone makes it strategically valuable. But titanium isn't Ukraine's only strategic asset. Lithium, the backbone of modern battery technology, could be just as critical. With the global push towards electric vehicles and energy storage, demand for lithium has skyrocketed. While Ukraine's lithium deposits are still underexplored, early assessments suggest they could be significant enough to attract the attention of both Western investors and major industrial powers looking to secure future supplies. Alongside lithium, graphite is another critical material used in battery production, and Ukraine ranks among Europe's top potential suppliers. Minerals aren't the only piece of the puzzle, however. Beneath Ukrainian soil also lie massive energy reserves, particularly natural gas. The Dnipro-Donetsk basin has long been Ukraine's most important gas-producing region, but much of its infrastructure is outdated, limiting full-scale extraction. There's also shale gas, mostly concentrated in western Ukraine, which could provide another pathway to energy independence if properly developed. And then there's the Black Sea gas fields. Before Russia's first invasion in 2014, these offshore reserves had the potential to significantly boost Ukraine's energy sector. But with Crimea now under Russian control, Kyiv has lost access to a crucial piece of its energy future. Beyond gas, Ukraine's uranium deposits add another layer of strategic importance. As one of the few European countries with uranium mining capacity, Ukraine has long supplied its own nuclear power plants. Rising global demand for nuclear energy means its uranium could become a high-value export if investment in extraction and refinement expands. Meanwhile, coal, once a pillar of Ukraine's industrial economy, remains one of its most abundant resources. While a large portion of its high-quality reserves lie in occupied Donbas, Ukraine still maintains operational coal mines in government-controlled areas. These continue to support its energy sector, but the war has forced Kyiv to adapt, relying more on imports and alternative energy sources to fill the gaps left by lost production. This vast natural wealth isn't just valuable, it's needed. The European Union has officially designated many of Ukraine's minerals as critical raw minerals, positioning the country as a potential supplier for industries trying to cut reliance on China. The United States is particularly interested in securing stable access to titanium and lithium, crucial for both its defense and technology sectors. Even China, despite political tensions, has previously sought investment opportunities in Ukraine's mineral sector. Yet, having resources is only part of the equation. Who controls them is just as important, and with many of Ukraine's most valuable reserves sitting in occupied or contested areas, the war has turned natural wealth into battlefield on its own. By some estimates, 30 to 40% of Ukraine's pre-war mineral and energy reserves are now under Russian occupation. The numbers are staggering. Nearly 90% of Ukraine's coal deposits, once the backbone of its steel industry, sit in Russian-held Donbas. In Zaporizhia, half of Ukraine's titanium reserves, a metal vital for aerospace and defense, are now under occupation. And perhaps most strategically, Crimea's Black Sea waters contain up to 3 trillion cubic meters of natural gas, reserves that could have reshaped Europe's energy map. Control, however, isn't static. While Russia has tightened its grip on key industrial regions, Ukraine has managed to reclaim some territories, such as parts of Kherson, yet the areas still occupied by Moscow remain the most resource-dense, leaving Kyiv at a severe economic disadvantage. Because this isn't just about land, it's about leverage. And Russia isn't the type to leave good spoils untouched. Like a seasoned pickpocket, it has a method. Grab what's easy, move what's valuable, and claim whatever's left as its own. In this case, that means 3 main tactics. The first is looting infrastructure. In Donbas, coal mines and steel plants that once fueled Ukraine's economy have been seized and redirected to serve Russian industries. Facilities like the Yanakiev steel plant, once a key supplier for Ukrainian construction and export, are now producing materials for Russia's military machine. In Zaporizhia, satellite imagery has revealed a sharp rise in titanium mining operations. The destination? Russian arms manufacturers, where titanium is used in everything from fighter jets to missile casings. Then there's the shadow market. Not all of Ukraine's stolen resources go directly into Russia. Many are laundered through third-party countries. Ukrainian coal, for instance, resurfaces in Belarus and Syria. Even China has been linked to purchasing resources extracted from occupied areas, particularly rare metals. And while these materials quietly leave through shadow markets, energy exports follow a different kind of smuggling route. A 2023 UN report highlighted that Crimea's gas production has surged by 300% since occupation, not just to fuel Russia, but to be disguised and sold abroad under falsified labels, bypassing sanctions and hiding its true origin. But perhaps the most blatant move has been forced integration. In 2023, Moscow passed legislation formally declaring Ukrainian minerals in occupied Zaporizhia and Kherson as federal property. This Russian-style legal maneuver allows Russian companies to extract and sell them as part of domestic production, bypassing scrutiny and international legal challenges. This systematic plunder has turned occupied territories into fuel for Russia's war machine and a bleeding wound for Ukraine. Kyiv isn't sitting idle though. It's fighting back on 2 fronts, militarily, by disrupting Russian extraction operations, and economically, by working to block stolen resources from reaching global markets. On the battlefield, Ukraine has targeted key infrastructure that facilitates Russian plunder. In late 2023, strikes on railways near Melitopol temporarily disrupted the transport of stolen iron ore. Ukraine has also focused on hitting logistical hubs in occupied areas, attacking railway depots and fuel convoys that help move raw materials into Russia. While these efforts slow down exploitation, they can't fully stop an enemy that controls vast territories rich in resources. Diplomatically, Ukraine is pushing Western nations to tighten sanctions on Russian resource exports, particularly coal and metals that may have originated from occupied Ukrainian land. Efforts are also underway to seize Russian state assets, including the $300 billion in frozen Russian central bank funds, to finance post-war reconstruction. Meanwhile, Kyiv has begun experimenting with blockchain tracking technology, aiming to digitally trace smuggled minerals and expose their true origin, a cutting-edge tactic to tighten the economic noose on Russia. By now, Ukraine has learned the hard truth. You don't always need to own something to make it valuable. Russia may be hoarding stolen coal, gas and metals, but Kyiv has found a different kind of currency, one that isn't buried underground, but negotiated in the conference rooms. Because while Ukraine fights to reclaim its lost wealth, it's making sure the resources still under its control don't just sit idle. If played right, they could be the key to securing long-term Western backing, and locking in support that outlasts the war itself. With much of its resource wealth out of reach, Kyiv is working to make what remains count, offering access, striking deals and positioning itself as a key player in a game where it doesn't set all the rules. As Western nations scramble to secure critical minerals and cut reliance on Russia and China, Ukraine is leveraging its untapped reserves to stay relevant. The latest move? A high-stakes agreement with the United States that could redefine its economic and geopolitical future. Under negotiations, the US will gain preferential access to Ukraine's titanium, lithium and gas reserves in exchange for funding, reconstruction and modernizing its mining infrastructure. The deal hinges on a joint fund co-managed by the Kyiv and Washington, with 50% of state-owned mineral revenues earmarked for rebuilding war-torn regions. For Ukraine, the calculation is clear. Trade short-term resource shares for the capital and technology needed to unlock its full potential. But the path to this agreement has been fraught. Early US proposals demanded sweeping controls over resource revenues, drawing fierce pushback from Ukrainian officials wary of ceding sovereignty. And I quote, "This isn't charity, it's a partnership," end of quote. One of the negotiators stated anonymously, "We won't exchange one form of dependency for another," end of quote. The compromise as it stands ties United States investments to strict transparency measures and Ukrainian oversight, a delicate balance between attracting foreign capital and retaining control. Notably absent from the deal, however, are explicit security guarantees. While the US frames the agreement as economic cooperation, Ukraine views its resources as inseparable from its defense. And I quote, "Every ton of lithium we export should translate into missiles defending our skies," end of quote. And this is argued by a Ukrainian energy sector advisor. This gap highlights Kyiv's broader challenge, convincing allies that economic support alone won't deter Russian aggression. Europe, meanwhile, is pursuing its own resource diplomacy. France has quietly negotiated access to Ukrainian graphite and uranium, key materials for its nuclear and defense sectors, through joint ventures rather than revenue-sharing models. Unlike the US approach, these deals focus on post-war supply chains, reflecting Europe's long-term strategic calculus. Yet, risks abound. Over-reliance on resource exports could trap Ukraine into a colonial-style dynamic, trading raw materials for finished goods. And without security guarantees, even the most lucrative deals leave Kyiv vulnerable. As one European diplomat warned, resources buy time, not peace. Russia's cannons don't care about lithium contracts. End of quote. For now, Ukraine's underground wealth remains both its greatest asset and its most volatile gamble. The coming months now after the signed mineral deal will test whether the minerals can do what missiles alone cannot: forge a future where sovereignty and survival are no longer at odds. This isn't a new story, just a new chapter. Nations blessed with valuable resources have often found themselves at the mercy of those who need them most. The question now is whether Ukraine can break the cycle or become just another cautionary tale. History offers Ukraine both a warning and a roadmap. In the 20th century, nations like Bolivia and the Democratic Republic of Congo saw their lithium and cobalt reserves fuel foreign industries while their own population remained impoverished. Today, Ukraine's titanium and lithium deposits, critical to airspace and green energy, have placed it at the center of a similar geopolitical contest. But unlike past resource struggles, Kyiv is entering negotiations with a hardened awareness of the risks. The US-Ukraine deal, for instance, exemplifies this tension. While Washington pledges funds to modernize mining infrastructure, the unspoken question lingers. Will Ukraine remain a source of raw materials for Western defense contractors, or can it leverage the partnership to build its own industrial capacity? The answer hinges on whether Kyiv can resist the gravitational pull of a global system that relegates resource-rich states to the periphery of value chains. The war has laid bare an uncomfortable truth. Controlling resources means little if you can't process them yourself. Russia's occupation of key mining regions didn't just seize raw materials, it cut Ukraine off from parts of the global supply chain. But even in free territory, the challenge remains. With less than 15% of its critical minerals refined domestically, Ukraine is still forced to export raw ore only to buy it back at a premium as finished products. The risks aren't just economic, they're strategic. Without the ability to process and manufacture at home, Ukraine remains vulnerable to the same dependency that has kept other resource-rich nations locked in the lower rungs of global industry. And the impact isn't theoretical, it's already unfolding on the ground. Take the Dnipro metallurgical plant. Before the war, it processed titanium for European aerospace firms, but after a devastating strike in 2023, Ukraine was left with no choice. It had to export raw titanium ore instead, losing up to 70% of its potential revenue. Or look at Ukraine's graphite industry. French investors moved in, framing their involvement as joint venture, but at first they were only interested in extraction. It wasn't until Kyiv pushed back, demanding on-site refining technology, that the deal started shifting towards real industrial development. Global power in the 21st century is no longer measured solely by who controls resources, but by who controls the means to transform them. China's dominance in rare earth refining, controlling up to 90% of global capacity despite holding 35% of the reserves, proves this paradigm. Western nations now face a choice: replicate this model by keeping Ukraine as a supplier, or disrupt it by nurturing a competitor. If Ukraine wants to break free from the resource trap, it has to rewrite the rules of the engagement. Step 1. Stop exporting raw materials. Start producing value. That means partnering with the EU to build lithium hydroxide plants. So Ukraine isn't just mining the lithium, but actually refining it, cutting China out of the equation. Step 2. Tie foreign investment into real industrial growth. When the US backs a titanium deal, Ukraine shouldn't just hand over the mining rights. Those deals should come with conditions, like funding local research and development and training Ukrainian workers. And step 3. Use resources as leverage to enter high-tech industries. Imagine this. Ukraine provides the raw materials for Germany's battery manufacturers, but only if they set up production in Ukraine. That's not just selling minerals, that's negotiating a seat at the table. Europe's resource strategy, once focused on long-term stability, now faces a more urgent test. Western nations must decide. Support Ukraine's industrial rise, even at the cost of undermining their own industries, or leave it trapped in raw material exports, reinforcing global instability. As one Ukrainian negotiator put it during the US titanium talks, we're not just arguing over percentages, we're fighting for Ukraine's place in the global economy, the chance to play in the next industrial revolution, not just supply its raw materials. Ukraine's fight isn't just about surviving the war, it's about rewriting the oldest playbook in global politics, the one where the rich and the powerful carve up the weak for their resources. Imagine a world where a country's minerals don't doom it to exploitation, but fuel its rise. That's the gamble Kyiv is making. Betting that titanium and lithium can buy not just weapons, but a seat at the table where the future is decided. But here's the kicker. The same minerals that could rebuild Ukraine also risk trapping it into a game rigged by others. Every ton of lithium sent to the West, every gas deal signed asks a silent question. Who really wins? The nation rebuilding itself, or the global machinery that profits from its pain? When the dust settles, will Ukraine's resources be remembered as the key to its freedom, or just another reason the world never stopped fighting over it? This was my deep dive into Ukrainian mineral wealth. Thank you for watching, my friends. Thank you for trusting your time with me. If you like this early access you get as a member, if you're not a member yet, you don't, but you can if you join up. It's only 99 cents, so join up the channel on YouTube, and every Saturday, 4 times a month, you will get these deep dives into topics connected to Ukrainian war. See you in the memberships, my friends. Until my next video, Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.